The Haudenosaunee are known for cultivating the Three Sisters, squash, beans, and corn, but fruit was part of their diet as well. For much of their history up to the 1800s, the Seneca and other nations gathered wild fruit. Strawberries were the first fruit after winter. May apples and bushberries followed in the summer, with crab apples, plums, pawpaws, and grapes coming later. Crab apples were roasted in the fire or marinated in maple syrup to give them sweetness. Towns knew where to find fruits, but they didn't claim ownership. Plants and trees grew where seeds were dropped, but there wasn't intentional cultivation until the early 1700s. Europeans began settling in New York in the early 1600s and brought their fruits with them. As Native Americans got seeds and stones, they traded them with other nations and spread them across the territory. European apples, peaches, and pears were embraced by the Seneca, especially the apples. Sweeter than crab apples, they could be eaten raw, cooked, dried, or stored underground in bark barrels. The Seneca moved to towns every 20 to 40 years and let the old towns return to nature. Planting orchards were a long-term investment, but cultivation around here started in the early 1700s. Sadly, most of the information about Seneca orchards came from the September 1779 American Army campaign against the nation. Soldiers were ordered to destroy all trees, crops in the field, or in storage so that the Seneca couldn't survive. Heading north on the east side of Seneca Lake, the troops found not less than 1,500 peach trees at Peachtown, near modern-day Lodi. Further north at Appletown, or Candia, there were hundreds of apple trees. On September 7th, they reached Canadasaga, now Geneva, and found orchards of apple, peach, and mulberry trees surrounded the town. Soldiers tried to kill the trees by girdling the trunks, cutting a horizontal strip of bark to stop the flow of sap, but it didn't work. 20 years later, in 1799, a Genevan wrote, quote, "The apple and peach orchards left by the Indians yield every year an abundance of fruit for the use of the inhabitants, besides making considerable cider. One farmer near Geneva sold cider this year to the amount of $1,200, end quote. Until the 20th century, cider meant fermented or hard cider. Almost everyone drank cider because it was safer. Water with its harmful bacteria could kill you. The alcohol in cider killed the bacteria and made it safe. An apple orchard was valuable and was usually mentioned when the farm was for sale. Surplus cider was a cash crop. Grocery stores would purchase local meat, cheese, flour, cider, and other spirituous liquors to sell. There was debate about whether hard cider was healthful or alcoholic. Teetotalers avoided drinks with any amount of alcohol. During Prohibition from 1920 to 1933, hard cider was illegal and popular. Geneva was surrounded by apple trees and sweet cider was legal. Hard cider was easy to ferment and sell on a street corner. The wholesale nursery business, the starting and selling of trees, shrubs, and plants, began in Geneva in the 1840s. They sold to new settlers in Western territories because a house wasn't a home without trees, especially fruit trees. These are just a few of the popular apples sold by nurseries in the late 1800s. In 1882, the New York State Agricultural Experiment Station, now Cornell AgriTech, opened on North Street. A fruit testing program began in 1888, first with open pollination, then with controlled crosses. This 1931-32 catalog listed 13 types of apples developed at the station. They were bred for taste and size, keeping time in cold storage, and time of ripening. Some of the varieties were Carlton, Cortland, Lodi, Maccoon, Newfane, Ogden, and Red Sauce. Carl Braze, a pomologist, is shown here with a Rhode Island greening apple tree that was grafted to dwarfing rootstock. Today, dwarf trees are grown in panels similar to grapes with minimal wood. Dr. Roger Way is shown here with 3 of the varieties developed in Geneva: Niagara, Spy Gold, and Wayne. He also developed Empire, Jana Gold, Spy John, Jana Mac, Burgundy, Geneva Early, and Early Cortland. Dr. Bob Lamb, shown here, and Dr. Herb Aldwinkle bred the Liberty and Freedom apples to be disease-resistant. The apples don't have qualities for processing and fresh market sale, but are good for organic and sustainable farming. Cordera, one of 3 new varieties released by Cornell in 2020, is related to Liberty and is named in honor of Bob Lamb, Cordera being Spanish for lamb. Dr. Susan Brown and research support specialist Kevin Maloney have developed the Snapdragon, Ruby Frost, Cordera, Pink Luster, and Firecracker apples. Firecracker is one of the few varieties that is good for eating, baking, and cider production. Today, growers focus on apples that meet consumers' taste demands. However, there are many varieties that may not sell in stores, but are great for cider flavor profiles.